Preemptive spraying is what that overhead aerial spraying is, and what we normally advocate as a last resort, because it is ineffective unless it's at a great scale, and it has to be timed just right to have to not affect non-target species.
Can't you spray the egg masses on the trees?
The egg masses will actually be protected by that film of fine hairs. So spraying like an insecticide directly onto it is not as effective as getting it into the digestive system of the insect. It's a good question. Yeah.
There are horticultural oils that are labeled for egg mass spraying, but it's very individualized, right? You're going to an egg mass and spritzing on it. You know, it's not something that you can broadly apply across the landscape.
Right. Yeah. So things like neem oil or horticultural oils can be sprayed to destroy the eggs, but like Brian said, it's very individualized.
And scraping them off, you know, I don't know how good anybody is at getting them off that tree, you know, that bark. They fall off the side. It's hard to catch them things.
Yeah.
When they go to the ground, they don't. That doesn't destroy them just because they're out of that egg, that mass either, right?
Right. So it is very difficult to actually scrape them off into
You need a
something.
vacuum.
That would be a cool idea, having like a small vacuum to suck them up
If
into.
they fall to the ground, if you've done some in the winter, they don't die?
No.
Not always.
Exposed. So it doesn't guarantee that they're dead, but there's a lot of bacteria, fungi in the soil, and they're exposed to that. But it doesn't necessarily mean instant mortality. It just increases their risk. But ultimately, the more that you know goes into that soapy water, the less that you know is going to live. So the goal is, yes, you might lose a couple to the ground. They might not make it. The goal is ultimately there's approximately 600 eggs per egg mass. You're trying to reduce the number by catching the mass of them. It's just like you're looking up in a tree. You're not going to get the egg masses that you can't reach, right? But you're trying to lower the number as best as you can.
Well, I actually thought about getting on a ladder and trying to grab them.
You better get along the
There's
ladder.
like a sheer spot. They seem to be
Yes.
about 15 feet off the ground.
Cut the sack open.
They're on. Oh yeah, they're way.
Yeah, cutting the sack open and just leaving it there wouldn't be enough, because they're pretty jam-packed in there and insulated from the environment. So completely exposing them is what you want, or destroying them in soapy water. What I do to try and scrape them off, especially for new ones, is use old cruddy toothbrush. It really gets down to the bark and can scrape them off, and kind of captures them as well. So then you can stir it in the soap and get rid of them.
So just talking like Dawn and some water?
Yep, Dawn dish soap and water works just fine, or your preferred brand of soap.
Can you spray that on them, or does that not really help?
You can, but it's better to get completely soaked.
So the horticultural oil that you were talking about, the ones that are truly labeled for spongy moths
Mm-hmm.
have detergent in them, and then it can be mixed with water, so
Yeah.
so it really penetrates that hairy mass.
Yep, they have the oils and detergent to help penetrate the hairs. That's really,
Treat all three agents.
yeah.
Make it truly effective against the spongy moth. But again, as you pointed out, you got to spray each of the plants.
Yep. Yeah, the hairs that protect the eggs are actually pretty resilient. So having anything that can help pierce through that is a great help, or by scraping it off the tree and into soap water and soaking it. That will more or less guarantee that you've killed whatever's in there. Yes.
Does the conservation district or state have like a reporting portal for tracking when people site them?
We do, actually. So there is the Midwest Invasive Species Information Network, also known as MISIN, MISIN. And you can report various invasive species on there. It's not just spongy moth, but it does help us keep track of where different invasive species are located and what we can do to kind of respond to that. Because spongy moth is so prevalent in Michigan, it's not considered like a priority species. So you may not hear back from anybody if you report it to the state, but it is something that we do keep track of to kind of monitor these sort of outbreaks and get an idea of when treatment may be necessary. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You got a bullet on an earlier slide that said funding resources.
Yes, there are very, very limited funding resources available for private landowners or even local municipalities to deal with spongy moth, because there is not, because it's not a priority species for the state, they don't have funding for it. So anything that is going towards funding for spongy moth treatment is done on a private level, almost like 99 times out of 100.
So this, you wouldn't be able to do anything cost share.
Right. Yeah. There's not like a cost sharing service or like an invasive species strike team that's going to come out and treat your spongy moth. We have the state has other priorities that it's focusing those resources on. So when we come to like this point where you have a forest that's fairly large, that's sort of 40 to 100 acres, and you're trying to deal with it on your property, it's not a whole lot that the state or the federal government's going to do to help you. But if you team up with your neighbors or talk to your township about like what can be done to survey for this invasive pest and kind of justify what you're trying to do with the property, then there can be resources made available at that local level.
I have several white oaks that were totally defoliated,
Mm-hmm.
and usually in the last few years they would come back. The leaf is always smaller.
Yeah.
Fall, by the time it go on. But this year nothing came back.
Nothing came back.
Is that the end of the tree?
Not necessarily. They can survive those sort of defoliation events by just going into dormancy early. But yeah, you may see some stunted growth or dieback of the tree this following year if it reflushes. Mortality is something that we do worry about with trees with spongy moth, because with repeated stress comes that risk of the tree dying from not just spongy moth, but all the other things that come in when a tree's stressed, like other insects, diseases, fungus. Because when their immune system is stressed, it's just like us, so more things can come in and cause more problems.
And were you saying also 5 to 7 year cycle? I'd heard earlier like a 3 year cycle, but
It's fairly long, yeah.
it's fairly long.
Yeah, I want to say 5 is like that average.
And then they'll go away, you think?
Yeah,
After 7?
they go they raise in population fairly quickly during those first few years, and then around between year 5 and 7 is when you see that crash down, and then it's down for a few years after that.
Where are we at in that cycle?
We're nearing the apex, I would say, because I've been here. I've been in this position for 8 years. When I started, it wasn't so bad, but now we're kind of really seeing a lot more outbreaks and a lot more people complaining about the symptoms of the infestations. So the more reports I get, the more I'm like, we should probably do something about it, right?
I know they're really prevalent through the north and northeast and
Mm-hmm.
out that way. But how about in this heat in the south and the west?
Yep, they're here just as much.
I mean, like Georgia, the southern
Oh.
states down there. Do
Yeah.
they survive in that or no?
This is more of a pest that's in the northeast. Yeah. I haven't heard much of that goes along in like Appalachia and south of that. That'd be something I'd have to look up to see what they have problems with.
We got better trees here, that's why.
Yeah.
There's sort of like an expanding border. There's a
Yeah.
bunch of universities monitoring the spread, and it is slowly making its way across the country.
Yeah.
It is seen down there in
Okay.
management aren't different than what we see here. Just because it's hotter, it just means that because it's warmer, their spring starts earlier. They just break out their eggs earlier. But I am hearing that they are emerging down south, and
But we transport them in our vehicles because they'll lay masses up under your fender and you
Yep.
carry them and then they hatch somewhere else. So,
yeah.
they're
Yeah, they don't
Eager.
stick to just trees, I know.
you know,
Yeah, they're just about on anything that they can lay eggs on, for sure.
Yeah, I had an old truck and underneath was just covered with old greasy transmission and stuff.
Mhm.
Masses everywhere on that thing.
Yeah.
Right in the grease.
Yep, they prefer trees because it's right next to where they're going to be feeding. But yeah, they'll lay eggs on anything. So it can be kind of funny where you find them sometimes.
I did spray the trunks of a few of the white oaks with that. My son has one of those mosquito fogging things, you know.
Oh,
And
okay.
sprayed the bottom, and we had a lot of dead caterpillars on the ground from that. But
Yeah.
that'll also, that's not good, you know, not for the butterflies or whatever.
Yeah, yeah,
Didn't see any dead butterflies around that, but a lot of.
yeah. There's a lot of risk for non-target. Yeah, that's what we try and avoid is just spraying everything. We're gonna pass this on to Nick.
All right, should we get started? So again, I forgot my name. That's all right. I sometimes forget names early on too. Again, my name's Nick Bartlett. So we're gonna go over a couple of management strategies. Again, the focus that I'm accommodated to is trees that are more in the urban, suburban environment, not necessarily forest settings, because that generally is a different approach. And usually when it comes to spongy moths, it's more of a nuisance treatment. It's not necessarily we're there to save the tree, and I'll go over why in a minute. It's more of I can't leave my house because these things are pooping and I don't want it in my hair. My car is covered in it, and then you got the gooey masses when the virus attacks. So it's more of making sure that their home is still livable. And that's when we tend to interfere, and also trees that are just generally stressed. When you have a healthy forest, there's a lot of reserves in that forest, a lot of reserves in the ground compared to that urban environment. In the urban environment, trees are planted where the soil is stripped. It's planted next to driveways, sidewalks, streets. So the root system is already infringed where they don't have as much carbohydrate stores as a lovely forest where it's open, they're free, they have those reserves. So in the urban environment, if you see defoliation, they're already in a stress position and it adds stress. If it happens in the forest setting, they have reserves, unlike that urban setting. And again, I'll go over that. So again, the gypsy moths, they're eating the leaves, right? So what do the leaves do? We all know they photosynthesize. They're creating the sugar for the trees so the tree can grow. The bulk of the metabolism from the tree happens there. But how important are the leaves there? Because, they drop their leaves in the fall, cycle repeats. So what happens, when it loses its leaves?